Let's learn something. So what's the big idea of Exodus? Exodus follows Genesis. And so with the overall theme of Exodus, it's more about redemption. God believed that the Israelites were His called people, and that made them special. After God rescued the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, God made the law, or provided them with the law through Moses on Mount Sinai. Now, the law basically just gave them instructions on how they could be consecrated or holy. And just as significantly, God provided details on how to build the tabernacle or the tent. This was so God could manifest Him in His glory to His special people that were called the Israelites at this time. This was just another proof that they were indeed God's special people. The Mosaic covenant, which was initially veiled or unveiled through the Ten Commandments, kind of gave them an idea of the worship regulations, of the beliefs and the practices of Judaism, from common eating practices to complex worship regulations. Through the law, God says that all of life relates to God. Nothing is outside of His jurisdiction. That's kind of a brief thing on Exodus. For today's Animal Spotlight, we're going to be highlighting a very common animal. You see it all the time outdoors, the gray squirrel. The range for the gray squirrel ranges, it's actually, believe it or not, more so geared here in the south and a little bit more northwest. They are found in just about any environment, especially oak trees and swamp bottoms. They spend most of their time in trees, but you'll often see them on the ground foraging for food. They breed twice a year and typically have 4 to 6 young per litter. They usually make their nest in a tree hollow or where the limb forks. They have remarkable ability to remember hundreds of locations where they have previously buried food. They are also known to chew on bones or deer horns to keep their teeth wore down and maintain good calcium intake. There's actually some variation in species with a unique blonde squirrel in Juniper Springs in Florida's Ocala National Forest. On today's Financial Spotlight, we're going to be talking about savings accounts. 85, maybe even 95% of you all know what a savings account is. I hope each one of you have one. Savings accounts are essentially a place you put your money in a bank. You earn minimum interest. Last I checked, it was like 0.25% interest yearly. That's not the greatest, but hey, your money is safe, it's secure, and it's typically federally insured up until about $250,000, like $250,000. The bank will insure if something were to happen, a robbery, whatever it may be, where you cannot access your money, it's federally insured up until that amount. Also with these, sometimes they can limit you on the amount of, deposits or withdrawals you have. I haven't seen one that does that yet, but they have it in the fine policy that they do that. And now these are a great place to keep your emergency fund. We'll talk about emergency funds and what that purpose is in another episode. But basically, savings accounts, where you store your money in the bank, not a whole lot to write home about. That's about that. There are tons of different types of savings accounts, but we won't even go there today because there is so many different ones. Some you can write off on taxes if you're, doing it for school or having a child. There's all kinds of things. You can get lost in the amount of savings accounts and all the different types there are. But for the most part, if you go to the bank, say I want to open a savings account, they'll know what you're talking about. So for the history aspect of this episode, we're going to be talking about Confucianism and Taoism. Could be completely mispronouncing those words, so I apologize. You can look it up for yourself. But Confucianism was based on Confucius. He was a famous Chinese teacher and philosopher. He was born in around 550 before Common Era or before Christ, and he was a noble but poor family is where he came from. He worked in the past to forgotten teachings of thinkers who were early age and to bring peace and stability to the people of China, starting with family and friends. Confucianism basically holds that there are 5 human relationships: ruler and ruled, friend and friend, husband and wife, older sibling and younger sibling, father and son. Confucius taught that they would treat each other justly in their relationships, and that it would be their duty to be compassionate. His teachings were responsible for a change in how government positions were granted in the Han and Qin dynasties. Okay, so Taoism is another philosophy based around this time of Confucianism. followers believed happiness comes from leading a balanced life in harmony with nature, living through simple and selfless lives. Both Taoism and Confucianism are considered philosophies rather than religions. That's a big thing there. They're not religions. Confucianism and Taoism, or however you pronounce that, are not actually religions. They're just ways of life. Because they examine, here's the reason why, they examine human behavior rather than the search for a divine meaning in the universe. So they don't believe in any external forces like God or Jesus. They just believe that it's just a way of life. Live a selfless, simple life, and you belong to these. Now, over time, Taoism grew into an organized religion. More writing, gods, and schools with different ideas were created. In today's China, Buddhism and Taoism are the two most popular religions in the country. Again, I know I'm mispronouncing that word, but nonetheless, that gives you an idea of those two things and how much of an impact they played in the development of modern-day China. And for our inspiring quote today, we have a pretty funny one. I got good news and bad news for you. Bad news is time flies. Good news is you're the pilot. Have a good one. Hope you learned something.